ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, I'm over there or what? That's it. I'm ready to see.
Guys, welcome back to the Pilbara Expedition series for part 2. It is morning of day 3 at Cowgan's Pool, and we're just hanging around there having some breakfast, enjoying the morning sun coming up, and then we are packing up, shooting off, checking out the awesome scenery kind of around the Hammersley Ranges, and then looking for campsite number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, Huggy.
Giving me a bat.
We're not asking for much.
The drillers done?
Nope. Bring the fire to you.
Not play with fire
Yesterday. Yeah, or play with water. Hey. Okay, alright.
He was doing them up.
It's nice and tight, restricted. Sacrificial time. I have. They could be a bit fun.
Anyone got some noise cancelling headphones? Man, make the fire bigger.
It's
Huggy, that's
pretty
the size
warm.
of the fucking nothing.
Oh shit, mate, you alright?
Someone's burnt their eggshell.
One for Terry's dad. First time. From Colombia. Single origin.
The climb to the top of Calgan's Pool has a lot of loose shaly rocks, and at one point you come around a bend and you pop up a pretty big rock, and you're right on the edge of a pretty steep tall hill, so it's pretty nerve-wracking. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, stunning. That's a good climb that one. Far out. Woo! Yeah, that gets the blood pumping in the morning. Far out. If you ever do find yourself at Calgan's Pool, then I couldn't recommend highly enough going to the lookout just above it, because it puts on a pretty awesome display looking between the two gorges as it kind of looks out into the Hammersley Range. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you with the descent.
That freaking Doc Martens.
Yeah.
I think so.
No, they're Kmart. Actually, no, they're Jackaroo. Yep, that's right.
So kindly put on Britney Spears for me to get through this.
Fierce woman, John. You just have to be fierce down the hill.
It's Britney, bitch.
Take no prisoners.
Sarah hasn't put on anything.
I reckon having a look at some of these ruts through here, you get some pretty interesting water flow in the wet season.
Yeah, I reckon it'll be pretty violent in some areas with some big rapids.
Especially between these two kind of gorges that we're in now, you get a lot of water flow. Should be coming up pretty soon. It's at the roadblock, isn't it? Yeah. Cool. Alrighty guys, so we've left Calgon Pool now, and we are on our way to Eagle Rock Falls. Again, as always, Calgon was pretty spectacular. We unfortunately did spend a lot of time under the bonnet of the Troopy, because if I haven't explained it in this point of the storyline already...
Yep, I'll do it right now.
G'day guys, we're post Pilbara trip now, we're back in Perth, and I just want to take this time, because we didn't really have the time to do it on the trip because we're moving around so much. I thought I'd take the time now to jump in the engine bay with you guys and just explain to you kind of what actually happened and the events leading up to it for that to actually happen. So we'll jump in the engine bay and I'll show you what happened. So basically all started, obviously in the water crossing, all started with the air intake just here. Basically what was wrong with it was that at the bottom of it there's a little separate air intake where a secondary air filter generally sits. Now 2.5 years ago, when we did our Shark Bay trip, the corrugations on that trip rattled that secondary air filter out and it's dropped out, and ever since then it's kind of had this small air intake at the bottom of it just sucking in air, and completely oblivious to me on that trip, that's where the water was coming in. So everything's airtight, fortunately, except for that one bit. And going through that water, obviously it was like 100 metre water crossing, so it was pretty long, and during that time it was just sucking up water, sucking up, little bits at a time, until there was quite a bit in there. Now, all the while, when the water was being sucked up into this airbox here, bits of water was coming through the air intake, and eventually it got down to the turbo, sitting just down here, and what happened there was water was starting to pool up down the bottom there. So with the water kind of coming up and pooling up in the airbox, and kind of coming through the intakes and pooling up in the bottom of the boost as well, that's when it started. That's when I could feel in the cabin something was going wrong. There was a lot of a lack of power. It kind of felt like I was getting bogged, which was weird because it was a rocky bottom. So I knew something wasn't right. And kind of as that was happening and the water was being sucked in, a lot of white smoke was blowing out the back of the car, and that's when the guys behind in the convoy kind of radioed through saying something was going on with all that smoke coming through. Fortunately for myself in the car, the engine cut out right at the end of the water crossing. Literally as we just pulled out, it cut out and stalled, which is pretty fortunate because then we weren't sitting in the water trying to diagnose what was happening. But basically the reason why it did that was because with all the kind of water coming up through the air filter and through the air system and pulling up in the bottom of the turbo, what it had done is kind of asphyxiated the engine and completely cut off airflow, and stalled it. So by doing that, it saved the engine, which was absolutely amazing and incredibly fortunate, because had water kept being sucked through, obviously it would have gone into the engine and just completely stuffed it had that had gone through. So used many of my 9 lives from that one, which was pretty amazing. So when we got to camp and eventually got around to try and see how bad the outcome was and how much water had gone into the engine, obviously at that point we didn't know that it hadn't, but we started taking apart the components that kind of run in and feed to it. So we completely took out this airbox and the hose running down into the turbo. We took off this hose here that runs across here, and we took this off, and from there we started feeling around where the water had actually gone, and that's when we kind of started to realise how lucky it all was. So we obviously could see the water in the turbo because it pulled up down the bottom of the kind of U-bend, but as we traced up here and kind of felt inside this pipe here and this one here, there wasn't a whole lot of water, just a tiny little bit of condensation. And as we came to this pipe here and kind of had a feel around in there after taking this off, we actually couldn't feel any water at all. So that's when we realised that the engine cutting out kind of sucked up that water, and as it was coming through here, it just completely cut off the airflow and cut the engine out. So before bringing it all in here and into the engine, which is incredibly fortunate, that's when we kind of started to realise that possibly my luck was still running, which is pretty good. Obviously, we didn't want to start the engine straight away after just looking at that. We wanted to be pretty confident about it before, confident about there being no water in the oil and engine block before starting it. So we ran a few tests. We obviously drained the oil, and the oil looked fine. We ended up putting it back in, and except for the last litre where any water might have been. So we put that back in. Before we did put the oil back in, we drained it and we manually cranked it, and we put some fresh oil in there to kind of get the remaining oil around the sides of the engine block, to try and get it out and to try and turn it over as much as possible and to hear if anything was wrong. Fortunately, everything sounded fine, and the oil was flushing out, all the old oil. So having done all that and kind of done all our checks, we ended up just leaving it for a little bit, so I could decide whether or not I wanted to tow it into town and get a mechanic to look at it, whether it would take a couple of days because of bookings or whatnot, or if we wanted to turn it over for ourselves. And with all the diagnosing we've been doing, we ended up being pretty confident with that. Well, mildly confident anyway. I was still pretty nervous turning the key, but yeah, we ended up giving it a go ourselves, and fortunately, incredibly, it just ran fine. When it first turned over, it was a little bit, it complained a little bit, but blew out a little bit of white smoke, but that just had to do with the fact that unburned fuel was getting through, and after a little bit it was running fine, running like a dream. So the rest of the trip could go on, and I'll leave you guys to it. Cheers. We were, well, almost around the Troopy, basically. A bit of water got in the intake and a bit of a nightmare, but I'll run through it in a bit more detail either before or later on from this point. But yeah, now we're on our way to Eagle Rock Falls. Got some pretty awesome forward driving on some of the hills. That's just above Calgary, and we are just over halfway to Eagle Rock now. So we'll likely go suss that out, see what the water level is like in the pool, because Calgary was probably a metre
metre and a half lower than what it was when we were here 3 years ago. So I sussed that out and then decide whether we want to spend the night there or head back to the flowing creek at Calgary Creek. And then also suss out Eagle Rock Falls, where you got a massive kind of waterfall looking over the gorges. So some pretty spectacular stuff to come. So we'll sit tight, see how it goes, and fingers crossed there's a bit of water left over. So there we go. Cheers, guys. Well, here we are, Eagle Rock Pool. Water level's a fair bit lower than last time, as expected.
Nash doesn't get his car does. You don't have a winch. No winch for you.
Don't need one.
Your birthday's coming up though, Sarah.
I just said to him, I was like, you give me a winch for my birthday. He was like, don't worry, I won't give you a winch for your birthday.
Slowly start buying like...
Just a set of 34s.
No, he got...
Okay, so we've just left Eagle Rock Pool, and we're just going to go suss out Eagle Rock Falls, check out the waterfall there, or the gorges around there. I doubt there'll be water flowing through it at the moment, but we're just going to head there. If it's a nice spot, then we'll probably set up camp there for the night, because there's not a lot of water going on at the pools. But depends, we'll see how we go. It's a pretty rough track getting there, but so it's like there, and then decide either we'll come back or we'll stay there. See how we go.
Welcome to Eagle Rock Falls. This is an absolutely insane structure of rocks where you have the first drop is 12 metres and then the second drop below it is a further 60 metres, and it just looks out to this absolutely amazing sight into the canyon beyond.
So devastating. That's a good drop. Actually, yeah. Oh, that looks good. No, you gotta have a nut shot.
Woo! How good is that? What? Oh, that's a long way down. How's the drop down here, no, Sean? Big. Oh, cool. That would make a nice campsite, wouldn't it?
It really would.
Got all the water. Although, more water would be nice. Cleaner water. Beggars can't be choosers.
Big thanks to everyone for tuning in. As always, if you enjoy what you see, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button so you never miss any of the future content. Cheers all, see you next time.